You're right. Justin, on the flip side, just a couple of short, sharp things like the addiction that young people have today to these things here, these phones, and what does a parent do with that? Because you cut them off, you're the enemy. You let them go, you've exposed the whole world. Snapchat, this, that, the other thing, and even kids with good, beliefs, good Christian values, or of faith, can fall into the trap and be led into the darkness. Really, how do we monitor it without being what's the word I'm after? Like the ogres. How do you do that? What do you do when you got a 14-year-old girl, you click, 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 all the time, and 15-year-old, and they're obsessed with this photos and this and that. How do you deal with that as a parent?
Well, I think that the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the previous question in terms of what the parents are doing. So let's step through a process. And I think that this framework might be one of the most valuable things that I can share in this entire conversation. So I reckon Tiankam's parents got this right, but I reckon a lot of parents get this wrong with the best of intentions. Pat, let me ask you, before I share the framework, what does the typical parent do on a typical day where they're a little bit tired, they're a little bit stressed, they're a little bit over having this conversation with their daughter or their son? What's the typical Aussie parent do or say in that situation?
Don't do it. I told you, I told you so, and then they go sit down on the couch and watch TV.
They pull out their own device and have a look at themselves.
Their own device, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they essentially become a little bit dictatorial, a bit authoritarian. And if that doesn't work, what's the next level? Where do they go from there?
Well, they threaten, they push, they try and take the phone off them. They try and, especially when they're teenagers, they try and take away privileges.
Right. And have you ever had a teenager say to you, Dad, or Pat, depending, I guess, on whether or not you're dad or whether you're doing youth work or something like that. But have you ever seen a teenager say, well, now that you've threatened me, I've seen the light and I think you're absolutely right. And I have a really strong desire to comply with what you're asking now. Thanks so much for being a little bit more power hungry than me. You've really and I'm on your side.
I've not met that child yet.
No. See what happens, and I talk about this really explicitly in a lot of my work, is that force creates resistance.
Right.
Force creates resistance. And the more forceful we become, the more resistance we encounter. Now, at the time that we're having this conversation, there's tremendous civil unrest in the United States. And what I'm watching in the news is that the more forceful the authorities are and the more forceful the political leaders are, the more angry the people become and the harder they resist. And we've got decades of this pattern being repeated at international and intranational, from a global level right through to the living rooms of our own homes. The same principle applies. Force creates resistance. So what I reckon is we take the force out of it. As parents, we're responsible here, and we've got to take the force out of the conversation. And here's how we do it. I call it the 3 E's of effective discipline. And they're as follows: explore, explain, and empower. So I'm going to give you a quick summary, and then, Pat, I want to share a story from my own family when I was dealing with a 13-year-old daughter who was exactly where you are with this question that you've asked. Okay, so when we explore, we try to see the world through their eyes. We try to stand in their shoes. We try to have empathy for their situation. So what I'm not talking about is an intellectual understanding. What I am talking about is a heart understanding. Remember I said before, we're really lousy at getting what's going on in our children's hearts. Well, this is the explore phase, and we do this really badly. The second phase is explain. As parents, we're very good at explaining. You know what kids do when we start explaining things? They go to sleep. They hate being lectured. They're like, oh, they're doing it again. And they roll their eyes and their shoulders slump, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to have to sit here until they finish talking. And then we empower. We empower by saying, I am the parent. I do hold the power, really. But if I didn't, what would you do? Like, how do we fix this together? So let me walk through that in a real life scenario. So I think it's about 2013. Snapchat's the new thing. No one was TikToking. TikTok didn't exist, so it was Snapchat. Instagram had been out for a while. The kids had sort of migrated from Facebook to Instagram, and now it was Snapchat. And my daughter comes to me, and she's got a smartphone. I didn't give it to her. It was given to her by her grandfather before he asked if he could. And my daughter's got this smartphone, and she wants to download Snapchat. And we've got a rule that if you're downloading an app, you've got to talk to dad about it first, or mum. And she says, Dad, can I please have Snapchat? And I said, no. And she said, Dad, I've been to your seminars. You're not allowed to just say no. You've got to explore, explain, empower. Yeah, you little punk. Okay, that's fine. Let's explore. Why do you want Snapchat? I grabbed a pen and paper and I started to write out her list. She said, because I'm the only kid in my grade that doesn't have it. Pat, they're always the only kid in their grade that doesn't have it.
They're always the only one. Yeah, that's right.
The only one. So I said, okay, you're the only one in the grade, as if. And I said, why else? And she said, because all my friends aren't talking to me and I want to be with my friends. I said, what do you mean they're not talking to you? She said, they're not talking to me. I said, well, you're on Facebook. Talk to them on Facebook. She said, they're not talking to me on Facebook. They're only talking on Snapchat. And I'm on Snapchat. And I'm being excluded. I'm being isolated. And I'm not with my friends. I said, oh, that's garbage. I just dismissed it, which was not a very parenting expert thing of me to do. But I didn't want to have the conversation. And I was feeling fairly dismissive. So I just told her, no, that's silly. I said, look, they're not very good reasons. No, you can't have it. And she said, Dad, that's not how we have this conversation. You're supposed to explore and explain and then empower. I said, fine. Well, let me explain why I don't want you to have Snapchat. Now, bear in mind, Pat, she knows what I do for work, right? I give talks to parents about how to raise kids and what's going on with their technological lives and all that sort of stuff. And so she knows that I've got good answers, but I don't want to put her to sleep. So I had a thought. I thought, well, rather than me explaining to her, I'm going to ask her to explain to me all the reasons that I don't want her to have Snapchat. Because her mouth's moving rather than mine. Wow. So I said to her, sweetheart, why don't you tell me instead of me telling you? What am I worried about? Why don't I want you on Snapchat? And she gave me a few reasons, and they were good ones, and I wrote them down. And I said, you've missed a couple. And I shared a couple of other reasons and wrote them down. I said, well, look, I've explored and now I've explained, and my list is bigger and better than yours. So, no, you can't have it. I mean, I was playing hardball. I wasn't in the mood for it. But I hadn't really done either of them very well. And she picked me up on it. She said, Dad, you don't get it. You're not even willing to empower me anyway, but you don't get it. And I said, yeah, I get it. You want to be like all your friends. You want to have Snapchat like all your friends, but my list is better and I don't want you on there. I just don't think it's safe. And she said, Dad, you're not getting it. I said, look, just talk to your friends on Facebook Messenger and forget about Snapchat for now. We'll talk about it again in a few months. I just wanted to kick this problem down the road. She said, you keep on telling me to talk to my friends on Facebook Messenger, but they're on Snapchat. And then she said something that really hit me. She said, Dad, that's like telling me to go play in the park while all my friends have gone to play at the beach. I said, oh, that's good. That's good. It was in that moment that I kind of went back to explore again, because she helped me to not just understand intellectually, but she helped me realize what it's like to be a 13 or 14-year-old kid feeling isolated and alone and detached and feels like she's actually going to miss out. You know, teenagers, their relationships move on, especially teenage girls. Overnight, if you're not part of what happened last night, you could actually fall out of the friendship because you weren't there for that thing. And what I actually realized was that her list, you know, why do I want Snapchat? The list she gave me was the best she could give me as a 13-year-old girl. But if she had the language of an emotionally intelligent adult, she would have talked about feeling isolated and disconnected. She would have felt like she was being disenfranchised. She would have felt like she was no longer able to connect and engage in meaningful ways with her friends because they were in a different place to her. And that's a very different conversation to all the other kids who've got it.
Should parents monitor some of the stuff that's going on in their kids' lives, social media?
Yeah. But it depends on their age. And this brings me to the last part of these 3 E's. And I think that's a really nice lead into that. So once she said that to me, Pat, I said, all right, I get that. And that's really hit me hard. But when you go to the beach with your friends, you got to remember that there's sharks and there's blue bottles and jellyfish and there's syringes in the sand and there's broken glass and, you know, there's perverts. And you'll get sunburnt, for goodness sakes. The sun is out and you'll get, you know. And she looked at me without a word of a lie. She said, Dad, have you been to the park lately? You know, she was It doesn't matter if I'm at the beach in the park. Most of that stuff's still going to happen, right? And I said, wow, that's another good point. Now, at that point, we changed the conversation and the park beach metaphor stopped. But if I was to continue it, here's what happened. I then empowered her because I trusted her and I was starting to trust, she was starting to trust me again. I said, all right, so we've got this problem. Your friends are at the beach. You're at the park. You want to be at the beach with them, but there's all of these risks and dangers. What can we do so that you can go to the beach in a way that I can feel good about? So I empowered her to come up with a solution. And what she basically said was that if I promise, now again, we actually talked about concrete things. I'm not going to share them in this conversation because every family's got to work it out for themselves. But if I was to continue the metaphor, what she basically said was that if you let me go to the beach and I promise to stay with my friends and only swim in the flags and wear a sun shirt and a hat and sunglasses and sunscreen and let you come and check in on me every now and again while I'm at the beach to make sure that I'm safe and I'm obeying the rules. Would you let me go to the beach then? And I said, well, you know what? I actually would. Yeah, I would. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to ask. And that's how we resolved it, those 3 E's. So to answer that last question of yours, should you be monitoring? Well, that should come up in the empower phase. You know, if she said the rules are stupid and I should be allowed to do whatever I want, I would have said, well, that's one option, but it's outside the boundaries that we're talking about here. So how can, you get where I'm coming from? Like, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
How do we work this out together? And when you just keep at it until you've got a solution that works for everyone.
Just, I know you're a busy guy, so just if I do 5 more minutes of your time, is that okay? Just another 5 minutes of your time to pick your brain?
Let's have 15. Let's play.
Yeah. Why? Just observing teenage culture. And again, back in the day when I was doing Youth Alive, and kids are very different now. And of course, I've got granddaughters and a teenage daughter, and many people out there have got teenage kids. Why do you think there is this obsession in teenagers with this whole hip hop, angry? Is it the culture? Is it from your point of view psychologically? It kind of doesn't make sense. There's something there that's connected them. Is it the clothes? Is it what is it that makes them all want to have? And I love hip hop, but what is it that engages with this culture of ghetto rather? And it's not a racist thing, but ghetto, where they got some of the most terrible language and whatever, and they think this is normal. Is it the parents aren't doing the right thing? Have we lost our compass as a society? And how do we, as parents, say, look, that's not good, and what I said to my daughter, I said, hey, I don't want you to listen to that. She said, well, Dad, what do you want to do, listen to the Wiggles? I said, that's probably a good option.
Well, Pat, I think, everybody's got different values, and one person's go is another person's palace. And we should always be sensitive to the fact that not everybody's going to see the world the same way we do, but it's particularly hard with your child. And I think that, if I go back to what I remember my parents saying to me when I was listening to all of my alternative and independent rock in the late 80s and early 90s, I think about what my grandparents were saying to my parents when, the Beatles, what are you listening to that garbage for? And nowadays we look at the Beatles and we think, oh, aren't they cute? They're like little puppies. And at the time they were these fire-breathing dragons. There is definitely going to be a cultural shift from one generation to the next. Now, some kids are going to love content, whether it's music or movies or social media, that is coarse and maybe even we might call it vulgar or at the very least explicit, and others will not. My kids don't like hip hop. Your kids may or may not. Some parents' kids absolutely love it. But if we find that there's a values clash, if we find that there's a culture clash, well, there's probably a couple of reasons for that. As our children enter adolescence, one of the central and critically important jobs that they have is to form their own identity. They can't be successful adults unless they have formed their own identity. And adolescence tends to be the time where that happens most powerfully, most impactfully. If they're trying to do that and we have an adversarial kind of relationship with them, the easiest way way for them to prove that they're their own person is to say no to us and to push against our values. That's how I get to prove that I'm me and you're you. I separate from you by literally coming out in opposition to you, whether it's issues around music or culture. It could be something to do with sexuality or spirituality. It could have something to do with their academic effort. You know, they'll pick the domain, and for every child, it will be different.
Yeah.
If we give something to push against, my goodness, they'll push, because force creates resistance. And this is part of how
That's just so powerful what you've said today. And like force creates resistance. The other bit what you said was when emotion goes high, your intelligence goes down. You know. Now, me being Italian, we're always. I mean, we get passionate about the opening of a supermarket. So
Okay. Well, passion actually means, it doesn't mean Tony Robbins, rah, I'm so excited and I can do anything, I can conquer the world. That's not passion. No. Passion, literally, if you go back to the ancient Latin, passion actually means suffering.
Wow.
Passion means suffering. So if you're passionate about something, you're willing to suffer for it. And let me add something to this. When we talk about how we need to have compassion, especially for our children when they're struggling with identity, or they're struggling with drugs and alcohol, or they're struggling with pornography, or they're struggling because they've got no friends, or they're struggling at school, or they're struggling because they've got a learning disorder, or they're struggling with bad attitude and horrible motivation. Whatever it is that they're struggling with, what we often do, as we've talked about through this conversation, is we get power hungry and we get authoritarian, and we say, well, I'm the parent, and damn it, I'm paying all this money for your school fees, or I've sacrificed for you, and I want to see what you can do. I want you to fulfill your potential. And they don't need that. What they need is compassion. Now, com, on the front of passion, com is, again, from the Latin, cum is what it initially was, which meant with others. Like you're in the company of others. You're part of a community. You communicate.
Wow.
So when we're compassionate, when we have compassion for our children, that is when we see our children having a hard time and being difficult and being challenging and struggling. Because when they're being difficult, it's usually because they're having a difficult time and they just don't know how to express it. They don't need us to tell them off. They don't need us to tell them to toe the line. It's my house, it's my rules, my way or the highway. That's not what they need. They need compassion. And compassion means we literally suffer with them. We literally step into their suffering and we suffer together. Now, I don't know about you, Pat, but to me, that is a game-changing idea, that when our children are struggling, we suffer with them.
Justin, that's a powerful, moving, what you just said there. I mean, you said some awesome stuff there, but that really is, and I think any parent who loves their child relates with that, and will relate that emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, because, for many of us, it's those feelings, when our anxiety levels grow, and then, and it's bringing it down there and entering into their suffering, and that is so powerful.
In the parable of the prodigal son, one of the key phrases right towards the end of that parable is that the father, when he saw his son from afar, he had compassion on him.
Wow. Yeah.
And when I think about that, I kind of put myself in that father's shoes. And you read that parable, I love the fact that he saw him from afar. That suggests to me that there is a worried father who is watching a wayward son who has been gone for so long. And the father is just saying, gee, I hope he comes back, and I'm going to watch that horizon. I'm going to look for that speck, just in case he comes back. And it says in the scriptures that he ran to him. Now, in ancient Israel, for a man, especially for a rich man, but for a man to run was considered unholy. For a man to run was considered something that was well beneath him. Men did not run. So here's this father who is watching from afar, sees this speck on the horizon and runs, because even at a distance, he recognized his son. And Pat, then it doesn't say he ran to him and he lectured him and he said, what are you doing back here? You don't belong here. You've received your inheritance. You've squandered it. You've made mistakes. You don't belong here. Get on. He didn't do that. No. He had passion on him, and he felt his neck and he kissed him. And then he brought him in and he celebrated his return. And I think that of all the stories in all of Scripture, that is one of the ones that resonates most with me, because when our children are struggling, they don't need our judgment. They don't need our criticism. They don't need us to be drawing lines in the sand. They need us to sit with them and say, this is really hard for you. I get it. I'm here for you. How can I help? What do you think? What do you think you should do? That's, I think, the ultimate lesson in parenting for all of us.
Wow. That was so needed. I really believe God put that on your heart. I really believe it will put that on your heart. And look, I'm unashamed. When people know me, they know where I stand. I tell people, listen, you don't have to believe what I believe. I'll respect your beliefs. But I believe that was a prompting of the Spirit to all of us here, because I think every parent related to what you said, Justin, and related to the compassion and the mercy and the Father, because the Father came out of you then. You're not speaking as someone who's studied, but someone who's a father and who sees us every day. And I want to thank you for that, because that was a defining moment in this interview. And I believe it's going to touch a lot of people's lives. I really do. Thank you for that. That was so powerful. So, Justin, where do we find you online? We want to build happy families. We want to have strong kids. We want to, where can people come to you if they want help or counseling or buying books or audio programs? Where do we find you online, and how can we connect with you?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. It's been such a delight to talk to you. I think that the best place for people to go, one of two places, either my Facebook page, Dr. Justin's Happy Families, or my website, happyfamilies.com.au. I've got a membership that's available to people that I think would probably be just so helpful for so many people who are listening to this conversation today, and they can get regular information from me to help them lighten the load in their families. So happyfamilies.com.au and take a look at that.
Well, thank you so much. Justin, we've got to get you back on. Thank you so much. I know people are going to be so touched by this when we email this link out. And thank you so much for your time. And say hi to your wife and your beautiful 6 girls.
Thanks, Pat. It's been a pleasure.
Now, do you have any grandchildren yet?
No.
Well, the best is yet to come. I've got 5.
The eldest is married, but she's assured me that there'll be a few years to go yet. She's pursuing studies, and I'm not quite ready. I still feel too young.
Well, hey, take culture where they call you nonno. It's one of the privileges, it's like, but thank you, Justin. Thanks so much for being on the program, and God bless you, and good ease to the family.
You too. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, man.